I'm going to go over the parts list for 2 jacks, since most likely you'll be building 2 aircraft jacks. And this is based on a long hydraulic ram. I got this one at Vivor back in the spring of 25 for $35. Now at Vivor it's $37. A better price right now in January of 26 is Home Depot for $30 for the same jack. Here's the specification for the jack. This particular jack is a single piston jack, and the ram only comes up when you push the handle down. If you want to spend a little bit more money, you could get a double piston jack, which the ram will go up when you're coming up or down, so it will go up twice as fast. Or if you want to spend more money, you can get an air hydraulic jack, which hooks up to an air compressor and will either come up when you pump it up, or it'll come up when you hook it up to the air compressor, depending on how fast you want to actuate the jack and how much money you want to spend. And as I said, the single piston jack right now, the best price, January of 2026, is $30 at Home Depot. The legs, I made them out of a 10-foot length of 1 inch and 5/8 by 1 inch and 5/8 super strut. And it's cut into 20-inch pieces, 6 of them, for 2 jacks. If you're having it shipped, you could have it cut in half, or you could have it cut into 6 20-inch pieces to cut down on shipping. At the top up here, this is a 2.5-inch PVC coupling. And I've got, for 2 jacks, 6 flathead by 3/4 inch, 1/4 screws with 6 nylock locking nuts. The support tubes is 1-inch EMT. A 10-foot length would make all 6 pieces that are needed. This is a 3/4 inch by 3/4 inch angle iron bent in a rectangle for the jack to sit in. At the ends over here, I've got a 1/4 by 1/2-inch bolt with nylock nuts, 6 of them for 2 jacks. This is a 1.5 inch strap, steel strap. There's 6 of them, about 4 inches long each. And then we have a 1/4 1-inch long bolt with a nylock nut at the bottom. And also there's a 1-inch 3/8 diameter, inside diameter spring underneath. Down here, 6 1-inch casters, swivel casters. You can also use 1.5 inch. By the way, instead of using 1 inch and 5/8 strut, super strut, you could use an 1.5 inch by 1.5 inch square steel tube or larger, or you could use a 1.5 inch by 1 inch channel, larger. To hold the handle, I've got a 3/8 bolt, 3 inches long, with a nut. For the safety lock, I have a 1-inch collar and a lever nut to tighten it with. For the 12-inch extension, Got 1/8 inch steel plate, approximately 5 inches by 4 inches, and there's 4 plates. 2 of them got bent up for the jack to sit on, and this is a 2-inch black steel pipe, 12 inches long, and there's 2 of those, one for each jack. Here is a parts list for 2 jacks with possible sources for each item. Feel free to stop the video and take a screenshot. I have also listed links below to many of the products. I will receive a small commission to help support the channel if you buy the items using the links at no additional cost to you. Thank you if you use the links. So I'll show you how to lay out the legs of the aircraft jack. Need to cut these at a 60-degree angle. There's my fancy digital angle ruler, and this was just $5 in AliExpress. So I'll set this to 60 degrees. And here you could see the layout for 60-degree angle to cut those. Now, if you don't have the fancy digital angle ruler, you can use a speed square. And to get those 60 degrees, this is 90 degrees, so 90 minus 60 is 30. There's the pivot there. And if we set this up for 30 degrees, we now have 60, 30 from 90 is 60, and there's 60 degrees to do that using a speed square. And then go ahead and cut these at 60-degree angles. And then you want to clamp this up. If you notice, I have a 1/4 inch plate underneath the legs, so that the end of the legs are a little bit lower than the center, so that when I install the casters at the ends, the jack will move around on the casters. And in this case, we will set our angle gauge to 120 degrees. 360 divided by 3 is 120. There's 120. And as you can see, we got 120 degrees between each of these legs. To use the speed square for 120, so this is 45 degrees from here to here. So from here all the way around is 135 degrees. So here all the way, if we subtract 15 degrees from 135, we get 20. If we subtract 15 degrees from 120, I'm sorry, if we subtract 15 degrees from 135 degrees, we get 120, and there's 120. Okay, so now I've zoomed out so you could see all the legs, and I can measure between the legs. I get 24 1/8 of an inch. Excuse me, 34 1/8 of an inch. And here it's 34 1/8 of an inch. And 34 1/8 of an inch. So that tells me that I got exactly 120 degrees for these legs. If you don't have welding equipment, you can bend up a 1/8 inch thick plate like this. I'll show you how to do that later. And then drill holes through the plate and then bolt it to the 3 legs. And then you have another 1/8 inch plate underneath and bolt that to the bottom. I would not recommend running a bolt all the way through the legs from the top plate to the bottom plate because that will allow things to slip. I would instead drill holes and put bolts in the top, 3 bolts in the top, and then mount the plate on the bottom and bolt it to the bottom with some plates that span across the bottom of the super strut if you're using a super strut. And you can build the legs up that way. Use flathead screws on both the top and the bottom so that they don't extend out too far. So I welded up the 3 legs, and I also welded up the 3/4 inch angle iron for the jack to sit in. You notice that the angle iron is not centered. That is because the center of the ram is offset. You can see when I put the jack in place that the ram is now centered. I would have shown you how to form the angle iron, except I forgot my phone yesterday, so I just went ahead and welded it up. I just marked it out on the base of the jack, and as I went, I just cut the 45-degree angles and bent it around as I went. I cut 3 1-inch EMT tubes to 24 3/4 inch long, same length as the first jack that I built. And now I'll go ahead and clamp them up in the vise, crush the end flat, about 1 inch. The bottom of the support tube will be bent to about 30 degrees. I'm sorry, the top will be bent to about 30 degrees, and the bottom will be bent to about 45 degrees. Make sure that the top and bottom are at the same angle. And this one will be the bottom at 45 degrees. I'll go ahead and do the other tubes, and then afterwards I'll go ahead and grind these off round and drill a 1/4 inch hole in either end. Next, we need to modify the PVC 2.5 inch PVC coupling that is supposed to fit over the jack. You could see a ridge inside the coupling, and that ridge prevents the coupling from sliding down off of it. So the first thing we need to do is remove the ridge inside the coupling. Here I've set up a sanding drum in my drill press. You could use an electric drill. Sanding drum kits can be gotten for about $6-7 from Harbor Freight, Amazon, or Home Depot, or you could also use a flap wheel that will fit in a drill.
and you just simply work the sanding drum around that ridge until the ridge is taken off. So here is the PVC collar with the ridge sanded off. I also removed the label on the outside of the collar for painting later. And here you could see now that it slips over the jack. So next need to lay out 3 holes equally spaced around the perimeter of the PVC coupling. So I place a center finding ruler on the edge of the coupling and mark off marks on the edge of the coupling. Then take the rule and locate the center of the coupling at the 6-inch mark. And using the angle finder, angle device set at 120 degrees, line that up with the center of the coupling and mark off the hole, the 120 degrees on the edge. And move the angle device around and mark the other 120 degree mark. Another way of doing this is to simply use a rule and measure equal distance along the edge of the coupling to get your 3 marks. The 3 marks should each be the same distance from each other. So next I need to transfer the lines on the edge of the coupling down onto the side. So using a square, I line up the square with the marks on the edge and draw the lines down onto the outside of the coupling, the perimeter of the coupling, at the 3 different spots, 120 degrees apart. And then I'm going to measure on the center to center the holes between the top and bottom edges of the coupling. Next, I need to drill the holes in the PVC collar. I've set up a V-block to hold the collar and to center the V-block under the drill bit. Under the drill, I put in a straight welding rod, and that lined up the V-block. Next, I'll put the 1/4-inch drill bit in, place that in the V-block, and drill the 3 holes. This way, the holes will be straight. Of course, if you don't have the V-block or a drill press, then you could drill it with just an electric drill. It's not that critical that it be perfectly straight. Next, we're going to countersink the inside of the PVC collar. I got 2 countersinks with right angle drives. The red one is an aircraft 100-degree countersink. And since it cuts faster, I will go ahead and countersink the inside with that. Then I'll follow up with the 82-degree countersink, which is the same angle that the flathead screws are made at, which is the US standard. I'm countersinking a little bit at a time and then checking to make sure that the flathead screw is flush with the inside of the collar. So now I've got all 3 of the holes countersunk from the inside. If you don't have a right angle attachment for your drill, then you could cut slots into a long flathead screw like this. Put the screw into the hole, chuck the drill onto the screw, and then turn on the drill while pulling back on the drill, and that will cut a countersink inside of the collar. The casters are installed on 1.5 wide, 1/8 inch thick steel straps, 4.5 inches long. I'm using 1-inch casters, which are the same height as the super strut legs. So I will bend the steel strap in order that the caster will be 1/4 inch below the super strut. To bend an offset in the 1.5 inch strap, I cut 2 pieces of 1.5 inch strapping, one 1.5 inch long and the other one 1 3/4 inches long. Together, end to end, they are 3/8 of an inch shorter than the 4.5 inch long piece. As seen on the edge view of the 2 steel straps, I rounded off one end and one side of each piece. You can do this by sanding, filing, or grinding. The 2 forming pieces are placed on opposite sides of the 4 1/2 inch long steel strap with the rounded ends facing each other and a 3/8 inch gap between them using double stick tape. The assembly is placed in a vise and clamped down. A cheater pipe is used to increase the clamping force. The vise needs to be very strong to handle the forces. An arbor press could also be used. Here you can see the strap bent into an offset. The double stick tape I'm using is quite strong, so I need to use a cold chisel to separate the pieces. And here's a piece with the offset. Now I'll pull out my cheap plastic caliper to measure the offset. I don't need one of my precision calipers for this. You can see the offset is slightly more than 1/4 inch. So now we will assemble the struts. I've inserted the flathead screws into the collar with a few drops of super glue under the heads. The ends, as you can see, the end is, I've rounded the ends and drilled the holes. And the end with the 45-degree angle goes down onto the strut. And the 30-degree angle goes up on the top. I'm using lock nut. And down in the unistruts, I'm using fender washers. I need to get a long nose pliers to place the fender washer. and place the nut. I will also remove the jack for painting the stand later. Next, I'll install the holder for the hydraulic pump handle. It's just a 1/2 inch bolt that's threaded all the way down to the head. And the handle just stores right there. Okay, now that I've drilled a hole in the leg of the jack, I upended the jack so I could see what I'm doing. I got an 1.5 inch long 1/4 20 bolt that goes through the hole I drilled. Then the plate, and the plate goes with the offset down. Then the spring and the lock nut. Then I'll give the nut a couple turns until the bolt sticks out of the lock nut. And as you can see, the spring allows the caster to go up when you apply load on the jack. I don't have the casters installed yet because I'm going to be next painting the jack stand, and I don't want to paint the casters. I'll put the casters on after I paint it. Yesterday I painted the top of the jack stand. Today I'll paint the bottom of the jack stand. I'm mostly concerned about the areas that I welded because the super struts are galvanized. I'm also concerned about the angle because that's black steel. It's nice to have this trigger device to keep the paint off of your fingers. Now that the jack stand is painted, I'll reinstall the jack. Get the nut back on. Okay, got the nuts started. Now I just got to snug them up.
And then I need to install the casters. Casters are pop riveted in place. And it looks like I have to drill the holes out again. I'm going to do that and put the other casters on off camera. The next thing we want to do is put a dimple in the top of the ram so that the aircraft jack point doesn't slide off. And the first thing we're going to do is find the center. And then we'll center punch it. So this is a spring punch, which is, I find, is a whole lot better than the automatic center punches, which sometimes don't work. All right, it's a little bit off center. We'll move it over to the center. There we go. Got it on the center. And this is through the hole is 300 thousandths of an inch. Okay. And I would rather not drill into that hole. So I'm going to start with a 1/8 inch drill bit, and I put a stop there, a drill stop, which is about 1/4 of an inch. And I do have a level on the top of my drill so that I can make sure that I drill straight in. Okay, got that in. That was with 1/8 inch bit. Now I use a 3/8 inch bit. And again, I've got it stopped at 1/4 of an inch. And then go to a 1/2 inch bit. And here I have the stop drilled at just 1/8 of an inch. And lastly, I have this abrasive ball, which will allow me to turn this into a round shape. And there we go. There's the dimple on the top. So I decided I wanted the dimple to be larger. So I got a larger 1-inch diameter ball and put in a die grinder. And there we go.
So that completes the video showing how to construct the aircraft jack stand. The video is pretty long, so I decided to have a separate video to show how to build the extension and the safety lock. Thank you. Bye-bye.